with that, I think we're ready to begin. All right, welcome everybody.
Should we wait for them to come back?
We'll get started, but we're going to go through we'll get started. No one's going to miss anything super important here. So welcome everybody to the May 24th, 2023 City of Edina Planning Commission meeting. On behalf of the entire Planning Commission, we are grateful each and every one of you are here tonight, whether it's in person or those tuning in remotely. I say it every time, but your curiosity and participation and feedback is vital to the process as we navigate change here together in Edina, specifically regarding the way in which people want to use their land. So before we begin, I have a couple things I want to share. So the city is committed to collecting feedback from its residents. So if you've heard or haven't heard of www.bettertogetheredina.org, that is the main conduit for which we get feedback, opinions, insight for development proposals. We want to make it clear that anything that's been submitted in that way or through email has been received by the city, has been directed to us, and we've committed as a body to have that reviewed before tonight. So your word that you've spoken has been heard, and we will use that to consider our decision tonight. Second, I'll quickly run through the agenda for tonight. So like most public hearings and planning commission meetings, we'll start with a call to order. We'll do a roll call. We'll approve the prior meeting's minutes as well as tonight's agenda. We have some special recognitions and presentations this evening. After that, we will have community comment, and that is your opportunity as a resident to speak about a matter not on tonight's agenda. After that, we have the public hearing portion of our meeting. We're tabling one, so we only have one public hearing tonight, and this is your opportunity as a resident to speak about that specific matter on tonight's agenda. I'll go through the specific process of that when we get closer. But for now, if you are tuning in remotely and you'd like to jump in the queue and just be ready to speak for that public hearing, please dial 786-496-5601 and enter conference pin 608-3502#. And then when you're ready to speak, we'll ask you to push *1, and we'll give you further instructions after that point. After the public hearings, we have one item in our reports and recommendations, and that is a sketch plan review. Unlike a public hearing, a sketch plan is an informal process for a developer or an applicant to provide an idea of a potential proposal they'd like to use on their land here in Edina. And that's our opportunity as a planning commission and later the city council to provide non-binding feedback in a way to help steer and help inform the more formal submission that would happen later, which would then trigger a public hearing and give you the opportunity to speak and testify. Between now and then, bettertogetheredina.org is open and welcome all input to be shared there. After that, we'll have chair member comments, staff comments, and we'll adjourn. So without further ado, hopefully, thank you. We will call this meeting to order. And with that, we'll begin with roll call.
Commissioner Felt.
Here.
Commissioner Miranda.
Here.
Commissioner Padilla.
Here.
Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Hu.
Here.
Commissioner Day.
Here.
Commissioner Strauss.
Here.
Commissioner Bornstein.
Here.
Commissioner Olson. Here. Chair Bennett.
Here. All right, thank you. Next, we move to the approval of tonight's meeting agenda. So if anyone...
Motion to approve agenda.
Do we have to move to continue the public hearing first?
That's probably a good bet. Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. So I move to continue the public hearing to June 28th for the zoning ordinance amendment regarding multi-residential land uses in the PCD.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. All right, now I'll welcome a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the prior meeting, April 26th, unless there are comments that you'd have revisions for. Yeah.
Oh, are we gonna, oh, so we just approved it with that?
Correct.
Okay. I do have a comment.
Okay, yeah, please share.
Halfway down, there is a note, I think there were two sides from the planning commission last time about the way the building was oriented. And there's one comment on here that says the building looks right being oriented the way it is, which is fine. I don't remember that comment being made. It may have been made, but I'm wondering if we can also add that another opinion was the building was not oriented the right way, if that's a possibility.
Yeah, I'm open. I guess, welcome a motion with that condition of revision.
And it's just a sketch plan, but it stood out to me.
Yeah, if you want to make a motion with that change, hopefully others support it.
I'm going to motion to add a line that the building doesn't look right, being oriented to the west.
Do we have a second?
Can we maybe motion to just strike that from that wording in general, right? Not to say that it is oriented or it isn't, right?
That's
just
fine.
remove the mention of that from the record if we want.
That's probably easier.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that.
Do you want to re-motion?
I'm going to re-motion to strike the line. The building orientation looks right.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Okay. Now to the part of our agenda for special recognitions and presentations. So Manager Scott Neal is here and will give a presentation. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Some of you have received this presentation. I think maybe all of you have received this presentation, some in an early format, but this is we do an annual reminder. We're starting to do refreshers for our boards and commissions about board and commission roles in the community. This is what our agenda looks like tonight. We'll review kind of the roles and what our advisory groups are, talk about work plans, and then get into some quick discussion about ethics. In our city, boards and commissions serve in a very important role as they add community perspective to the decision-making process for city council. In a very summarized view of this kind of triangular relationship, staff bring expertise and operational expertise to the table, and commissions bring community perspective. Sometimes there's a little of technical advice that comes from commissions too, and sometimes there's some community perspective that comes from staff. But largely, those are our two areas. Elected officials, we are both here, though, to support the role of our elected officials. Staff are here in that respect, and boards and commissions are here in that respect to help them make policy. The council makes policy-level decisions. They hire and supervise the city manager. They approve the budget, and they appoint all of the advisory boards and commission members. Staff liaisons, again, provide technical expertise to the council and to commissions, and we communicate commission work to the city council, as you do occasionally as well, and also to the community. Advisory boards and commissions, again, advisory to the council and provide community perspective. They act as a buffer sometimes for the city council for public policy issues. And they also serve as a great training ground for future leaders. All of our current city council members were at one time on a board or commission. Engagement, community engagement is a very important value of our city and our city staff and city government. I think it's important to remember that having boards and commissions in the system that we have is a level of engagement. It's important. It's an important level of engagement. It falls really far to the right on our continuum of collaboration and empowerment. Legitimacy and accountability are kind of the key roles that we are trying to achieve. Boards and commissions and city staff get their legitimacy from city council. That's where we are appointed from, both from a staff side and from a commission side, and that's where your legitimacy comes from, and that's also where your accountability comes from. So the people elect the city council gains its legitimacy from their election certificate. They're accountable to the people. We are accountable to the city council. We don't always agree. We agree most of the time. We have 10 boards and commissions all meeting to complete their work plans during the year. Sometimes we're going to disagree. Sometimes that has to work its way through the council process, and we stand in front of the council, and the commission makes an argument, and staff makes an argument, and we ask the council to decide. That happens a couple of times a year. I think largely we resolve a lot of our issues at the staff and commission level. These are some of the subgroups of commissions and comparing them to commissions. So there are two primary subgroups of our commissions, subcommittees and working groups. The main difference between the two are who the members are. In a subcommittee, it's only members of the commission itself, and in a working group, it's commission plus really an unlimited number of public members. Everything else is fairly consistent. Work plans. We are a work plan-driven organization, so we decide what it is we're going to do for the upcoming year. We bring that desire to our city council, and they say yes or no or maybe, and we build budgets off of that as well. So when you think about our strategic documents, we have our Vision Edina, which is a futurist document that has informed our comprehensive plan and also our budgeting, specifically through our capital improvement plan. Those impact our budget work plan, our operating budgets, which feed down to department work plans, employee work plans, and commission work plans. Our 2-year budgets are really developed at the staff level. They're approved by the city council, and I'm accountable for those to the city council. Work plans are developed at the department level. I approve those, and department directors are accountable. We jointly work together to create a commission work plan that is presented to the council and approved by the council. These are our 4 budget work plan pillars. You'll see these throughout our budget. These add to some kind of the important themes of where our budgets flow through. A strong foundation around infrastructure, reliable service through the many services that we provide. Livable city, kind of around our planning functions here, and Better Together, which is around our community engagement. And our budget work plan values: stewardship, equity, health, and sustainability. You'll see these values kind of woven throughout our budget. And this is a budget year for us. We will be preparing our 2024-2025 city budget later this year. Values Viewfinder. This is really about how we find the sweet spot in community well-being around race and equity, health and all policies, sustainability, and community engagement. And MJ Lehman and Heidi Leek, and I think have been here, Carrie, to talk about that? Okay. Our work plan development at the commission level starts with the commission. We think that's very important. It leads up to the staff and then ultimately to the city council. This is what the work plan calendar looks like. So we're almost into the June-August timeframe. That's when we start to develop proposed work plans. So this is the time when you, as appointed officials, as commission members, can propose the things that you really think the city ought to be doing, and that you kind of what you wanted to get on the commission for, quite frankly. This is the time to do that. We put those work plans together in September. The chairs of all the different boards and commissions come together in October, and they pitch those proposed work plans to the city council. I think it's important that you all know that happens. That is the first thing that happens in our work plan process, is that chairs present the work plan to the council unmitigated by staff recommendations. So staff does get to play a role in this. We get to present our work plan or our comments on board and commission work plans, but not until you've had a chance to present them to the council first. So staff get to come into the process in November. Ultimately, the council approves those work plans in December. There's no rebuttal process. Once they're approved by the City Council in December, that's the work plan that you start and use throughout the succeeding year. Work plan development roles, we talked a little bit about this already, but the chair leads that process, and there's typically consensus around work plans. If there isn't, we can help you with that. Staff provide technical expertise, but in terms of the policy recommendations, we want those to get to our council if they are also the consensus of the commission. You see throughout our work plan this business around charges, charge 1, charge 2, charge 3, charge 4. This is where the city council tells you kind of how much they want you to work on these projects and really kind of what their expectation is for a deliverable. If it's charge 1, study and report, they want you to read it, they want you to come together and give them a summary of what you think the issue is. Charge 2 is a review and comment, so this is where they want you to review whatever that issue is and make some comments, all of you, if you wish, that come back to the city council and inform the council on a policy issue. This might be where the council would put you into a situation where they are studying an issue or want that next step of analysis to decide before they put a task force together or an ordinance or something. Charge 3 is review and recommend. At this stage, they want you to vote. They want to know if this is a 5-5 or a 5-4 on the Planning Commission, or if it's 9-0. But they want to get a sense of what the consensus on the commission is. And charge 4 is where they want you to review and decide, right? So there are some forms of approvals on all of our boards and commissions that the council is comfortable with deferring to you. Work plan and non-work plan items. So to the extent that we can, we do want commissions, and the council does too, to work on the work plan items, right? So they were presented to the council, approved by the council. That's what the council wants us to do, wants staff to do, wants you to do. If there are non-work plan items that arise during the year, we have a process to bring those back to the council and see if there's council support for you taking those items and putting them into your work plan somewhere. Ethics and conduct. Rights and responsibilities as residents. You haven't given up your right to speak on issues, public issues, in front of the council. We do ask you to speak as an individual if you are, and not to engage really on topics of interest to the Planning Commission. So sometimes you see a planning commissioner or a commissioner come right off the dais and come behind and speak on an issue. We don't want you to do that. But if you want to show up at a Board of Appeal and Equalization meeting and appeal the value of your property, you're certainly willing to do that, certainly able to do that. Conflicts of interest. Any conflicts of interest are when you have a potential pecuniary gain, a financial interest in an issue that's before the commission, and it can happen to planning commissioners. We don't have many commissions where this could be an issue, but it can be an issue sometimes at planning commissions if you are in the real estate business or the legal business or the development business, that you can kind of get into that situation sometimes. If you have a concern about whether you're too close or whether you may have a conflict of interest, it's important for you to talk to Kerry about that. He may talk to me about that, and we may get a city attorney involved, and we'll give you an opinion about whether you have a conflict or not, or whether we think you do. Gifts. Your friends can still give you gifts as long as they do not have business in front of the commission, right? So if they're an interested party, they can't take you out for dinner, or they can't buy you any substantial gifts. They can buy you a cup of coffee, and that's about it. But again, that doesn't happen a lot in most of our boards and commissions, but it can happen here sometimes. And if you have that opportunity, or if that's presented to you and you're uncomfortable with it, or you think you might have that situation come up again, talk to Carrie, talk to me, and we'll help you through that. Code of ethics. I won't read the code of ethics to you, but it is in the handbook that we passed out earlier today. It's a pretty common sense, I'll say, code of ethics, talking about how we work together and kind of our behaviors towards not just our organization, but also each other and the public. I'm happy to answer any questions you have of any of that.
Any questions? Yeah,
good.
Commissioner Smith.
Thank you so much, Manager Neal.
Yes.
I know on the levels of engagement, there's a framework that I think the city goes through. It's called IAP2.
Yes.
Could you just talk a little bit more about that framework?
The IAP2 is the International Association of Public Participation, and it is an organization that we belong to that helps train our folks on engagement, how to engage effectively with the community, and how do we bring out different styles of engagement with the community. So we can't have a public referendum on every kind of issue in front of them. So how do you gain public feedback, and how do you process it? How do you use it in order to make public policy decisions? So that's what that organization does, and they produce this framework, and we've been using that here for about a decade.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's that. So now we'll move on to the next piece on our agenda, and that is the community comment. As mentioned, this is the opportunity for residents who are here in person to share relevant issues or concerns that are not on tonight's agenda. Similar to the public hearing process I'll go over later, you must limit your comments to 3 minutes. Come up to the podium, give your full name and address, and you'll see an amber light come on when there's only 30 seconds left. A red light comes on when 3 minutes is up, and we'll ask you to wrap up. Is anyone here for community comment? If so, please come up to the podium. Thank you. So, I guess just to say, from what I'm quickly looking over, this is pretty relevant to an item that's on tonight's agenda, so we're gonna...
I'm not here for affordable housing stuff.
Okay.
Whatever the affordable housing
Okay.
thing is that the other group is here for.
Okay. All right.
I didn't even know they were going to be here with
Okay.
their lovely green shirts. Okay, Janie Weston, 6136 Brookview Avenue, Edina. And I am here to talk about something that is not on tonight's agenda. It got tabled, and I have more than 30 days before you will be discussing it. So that's why I came tonight. I am requesting that all of you please carefully read through Zoning Code Section 36-612, and that concerns conditional uses. What you will be looking at is how conditional uses are allowed for PCD 1 and 2, planned commercial districts. Read through this very carefully. It is very clear that 612, the reason why this section is here, if you count how many double underline times the word affordable comes up in here regarding affordable housing, affordable units, affordable rental. That is the emphasis and what 612 is all about. It is not about adding one line to amend the code to then basically say, city council can do whatever they feel they can do with a conditional use. I have a real problem with that. It does, to add amend one sentence, and I would like everyone to check this out. Look at how it's worded on Better Together for Section 36-618 Zoning Ordinance Amendment. How that is worded, and you can scroll down the right-hand side, look at the actual document. It's adding one sentence. Think very carefully about what this means. Why has conditional use been used to allow residential living at ground level and or basement level 3 times now that I'm aware of in my neighborhood within 1 or 2 blocks from where I live? It's been used for PCD1, commercial zoned lots, to allow residential that's completely residential. So please think about this. I will be back. Please, you all have the same information. City Council got this the last time I went to a City Council meeting too. So this is really important. It's more complicated than people realize. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I apologize. That is not on tonight's agenda. You're correct. One further reminder before we go on, just please silence cell phones and limit talking that's disruptive to other people here. Is anyone else here for community comment? Please come up. Carrie, not you. Scott just said that, you know. Yeah. All right, seeing none, we will move on to the public hearing portion of tonight's agenda, and I'll give you a quick rundown of what to expect for that. Typical process at each of these planning commission meetings with the public hearing. It'll start with staff giving a presentation based off of the proposal and kind of where we're at today. Then we'll give the opportunity for planning commissioners to ask questions of city staff, get clarifications. Then it'll move to the applicant or developer. They have an opportunity to give a presentation and or ask or answer questions of us. After that point, we will open it to a public hearing, and that is when you have the 3 minutes to testify. Since we're beginning that portion, as I mentioned earlier, for those who are tuning in remotely, if you want to get ready for that, you can call in to 786-496-5601, enter conference pin 608-3502#. That'll get you into the conference room for this. And when it's your turn to speak, press *1. After everyone has the opportunity to opine and testify, we'll close the public hearing. Then it comes back to the Planning Commission to deliberate and ultimately make a recommendation for approval or denial. And for this one, this will continue on as a recommendation to the City Council. So with that, Planner Teague.
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. So before you this evening is a request to make some revisions to an approved conditional use permit and variance from about a year ago. This is for the Interlaken Country Club, located up in the northwest corner of the city. So in 2022, Interlaken received a conditional use permit and a height variance for the tennis structure. It's highlighted in red right here. They received a variance for the structure to be 39 feet tall. So what's before you this evening? There's no changes in regard to the size of the structure, the location, or the height. Just simply some modifications to the building itself. And the purpose of that is in response to some of the residents in the area to reduce light from the building, reduced sound from the building, and make the building more sustainable. So again, the request is simply to revise an existing condition to allow these revisions. So I'll quickly go through them. So this is the east elevation. So this faces interior toward the clubhouse into the golf course. They are reducing the number of garage doors by 1 in this area, so not as much light here, but again, this is facing the club itself. This is the west elevation, so this faces, there are single-family homes across a parking lot. We're looking this way. So here they're reducing the number of garage doors that did emit light. They're reducing that down to 2. And again, it improves acoustics, light from it, and is more energy efficient. This is the south elevation. This faces the driving range to the south. They're eliminating these dormers here that were part of the project, and again, reducing area where light came out of the building. This is an elevation to the north. Quick show. So this is facing to the north, where there are single-family homes up there to the north. So again, it's eliminating the dormers, so less light comes through, and reducing the amount of the garage doors. Just some quick elevations of what it will look like. So this is a rendering of, are examples of how that light was coming from the building previously, so you can see why they're wanting to reduce the amount of light. So the recommendation is to approve the amendment to the previous approved conditional use permit and height variance to change out the building plans for this structure. Joel Livingood is here from Interlochen, and he'll have a presentation and go into this in a little more detail. And you'll note in the packet the response from Better Together is generally, it's been positive from the neighborhood. With that, I can stand for questions.
Yeah, before we open up questions for residents as well as fellow commissioners, Carrie, could you kind of discuss what is that distinction, that delineation of when there's a change to a plan, at which point it triggers coming back before us like this?
Yeah, so this one, being that it's a conditional use permit, it was subject to and a variance, subject to these specific building plans. There is a provision in the code that allows staff to administratively approve revisions to a plan under certain thresholds. That section doesn't apply to this because it wasn't a site plan review. So that's what differentiates it from other projects where staff is able to make revisions administratively. Here, we were not.
Thank you. Questions, fellow commissioners? All right, without seeing any, we'll welcome the applicant. Name, address, favorite color, you know.
My name is Joel Livingood. I'm the general manager at Interlochen Country Club, 6200 Interlochen Boulevard in Edina. And I think my presentation, candidly, very similar to Carrie's. I think in just respect of everybody's time, just maybe share a few comments, and then happy to address any questions and look at some of our designs and elevations further. As Carrie mentioned, we're back in front of you today for 3 primary reasons. Throughout the conditional use permit approval process last year, both at the Planning Commission and at the City Council, we received a lot of valuable feedback, both from city officials as well as residents in regards to the design of the facility. And really three themes stood out: reducing light, reducing sound, and improving sustainability. And so when we were here last year, we were really in the conceptual design phase. And so we took that feedback over the course of the last several months and landed on our final design, which dramatically reduces light emissions to the neighborhood as well as sound, and improves sustainability. And so hopefully the presentation included in your packets and presented by Carrie makes those changes clear. We have had several proactive conversations with residents and neighbors, and I believe some of that feedback was shared with you all, but universally, at least with those that we spoke with to date, support the changes and candidly prefer the changes to the plan. And so we'd ask for approval tonight, and again, I'm happy to walk through anything specifically here, but I think probably in the interest of time, I understand there's more important issues here tonight. Happy to just address any questions and walk through the presentation or anything in detail if there are any.
Any questions, preferences? Yeah, Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Joel. Really appreciate just jumping into the questions here. Just a quick question on the dormers.
Sure.
So I know in this new plan, you removed the dormers from the building. What was the original use case for dormers? Was it airflow, light?
Natural light, yeah. So the initial design had both the dormers, and then it had those, Carrie showed those kind of translucent polycarbonate structures on both the gable ends, and so we were seeking to, introduce some natural light into that space. But ultimately, I think, we've always said we want to be good neighbors, and I think we certainly, we mean that when we say it. And so we heard a lot of feedback about light emissions, and ultimately, not more important than being good neighbors, and so decided to remove both the dormers and those translucent polycarbonate panels.
Yeah, just a follow-up there. Is there a design, like a sunroof or something like that, that you could achieve that would get the light in, but not so much reflected back into the community?
Possibly. The feedback we got primarily from residents was, we just wanted the building to kind of essentially blend in with anything else that's there. And as you look at kind of other roof structures in the neighborhood and up and down the block, there are some homes that, frankly, based on the elevation of where this building sits and others, get to a very similar, kind of height depending on where you're sitting or viewing. And we really just want the building to kind of blend in with the neighborhood and disappear. So we didn't look too seriously into any other design modifications. If the feedback primarily surrounded reducing that light and trying to make the building go away, and we found the most efficient way to do that while still being meeting our needs and being good neighbors at the same time. So,
thank you.
Of course.
Commissioner Felt.
I have a question. I actually didn't think I had any, because I thought, so the end panels had the polycarbonate panels, and now you're taking them off.
Correct, yeah. The conceptual design did on both the east and west gable ends.
And the east and west face the neighborhood. The west.
The west does. The east faces our property. The west faces the neighborhood. Correct.
I'm sure the neighbors appreciate that's now solid, and there won't be light leaking out. Thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Jim.
We will move to the public hearing portion. So just before we open it here, for anyone, again, who's just tuning in now and is tuning in remotely, please call 786-496-5601 and enter conference pin 608-3502#. Hopefully everyone here has that memorized. Before we open it to people tuning in remotely, we will open the public hearing now. So this is a chance for anyone who is here that would like to speak on this matter. You can come up to the podium. You have 3 minutes to speak, like the community comment. It'll turn green when your 3 minutes starts, amber when you got 30 seconds, red when your time's up. We'll tell you to wrap it up. It's not necessary to provide testimony if you've already shared those thoughts via bettertogetheredina.org or email or voicemail. But if you're here and would like to do so, we welcome you to do so. So with that, is anyone here ready to speak? You can come to the podium. So seeing none, we will open this to our remote call-in. So for those who dialed in, please press *1 to get into queue to speak. We'll give it about a minute to catch up.
Yep, we don't have anyone on the line right now, but I will count down from a minute just to make sure nobody joins us.
Okay. I'd actually welcome some cell phone music now, but we'll wait till another time.
So we did have one caller join us, but they have not indicated that they want to speak by pressing *1. So if you would like to speak, please press *1 right now. looks like they disconnected, so I believe we are good to keep moving forward.
If you are here to speak, we'll allow you to do so. You have 3 minutes.
All right, this will be real quick. Jamie Weston, 6136 Brookview Avenue. Very interesting that this project is a conditional use permitted project. That's correct? It doesn't follow what section 36-612 of our city code says is appropriate and what conditional use is for. Please read what I gave you tonight. How many more in the city have been granted conditional use when it's not what our city code says? So this is eye-opening. Thank you.
Would you like to speak about the matter?
Well, I guess.
Just please state your full name and address, and we got 3 minutes to speak.
You really emphasize that 3 minutes, don't you?
Yeah, we gotta.
I suppose. My name is George Holden. I live at 6633 Biscayne Boulevard. I've lived in Edina for 29 years. Before that, I lived in the city of Minneapolis, except I went away for school for some time. You don't care about that, but I have lived here for 29 years, and I moved here purposely because of what Edina had to offer. And what it had offered had come about, as you already know this, it came about through years and decades of planning by some really smart people who said, gee, we ought to do this in this part of the city, and we ought to do this over here, and we should do this over here, and that's how the city should work. And I have 3 comments on what is being proposed as far as this apartment is concerned, because I don't think it fits in well with what I moved here for. And
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is a public hearing for the conditional use permit at Internet.
I'm sorry, you were not talking about this apartment building?
No, and
Well, I need more experience in this. Okay, I'll sit down.
Totally understand.
Okay.
Thank you. So I guess with that, no one coming up, I'd welcome a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. So moved. Public hearing is closed. And on that note, and just to be clear, related to the next matter, which is the sketch plan review, the process, if you're confused or unfamiliar, sketch plan is the opportunity for the applicant to get non-binding feedback from the Planning Commission. There is not the opportunity to speak at the podium and have 3 minutes like a public hearing. So it's a different process. So if you're here expecting to speak, I apologize. There's other avenues to get your input, and we welcome that. We read it, we consider it. But back to the matter at hand, do we have any comments, recommendation, motion? Yeah, Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, I'd like to, for the applicant, that was a very good, the package very clearly showed what was to be reviewed and the improvements. So that was very clear. The materials were very good to get right to what was being changed, what was originally approved, and what was being changed and why. And I went and looked at, I guess it was June maybe of last year when we considered this, and though it wasn't unanimous, the Planning Commission did approve. And the issues that we discussed, for the most part, had to do with parking and other things, and one of them was the lighting, and it has been addressed. So it certainly appears that we're consistent with, and it is a better project, and things have been improved. So I don't see any problems with this.
Thank you. Yeah, Commissioner Padilla.
Last year when we looked at this, I was the nay vote. So, and I had an issue, and I'm far more comfortable with it now. So thank you very much for making those adjustments, and I think it's a much better fit.
Any other comments or welcome a motion?
Motion to recommend the City Council approve an amendment to the conditional use permit and height variance at 6200 Interlochen Boulevard, subject to the findings and conditions outlined in the staff report.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations. Good luck with the rest of your project. Now we'll get Michael Block to come up here. PGA Pro. You gonna get him? All right. Maybe later. All right, moving on. Next part of the agenda is our reports and recommendations, and this is the sketch plan review for 5780 Lincoln Drive. If you're tuning in or just joining us, as mentioned before, this is similar to the public hearing where we're going to have a staff presentation, then an applicant presentation, questions back and forth, and then it'll end pretty much with just us giving our non-binding feedback to the applicant. There's not an opportunity for residents to speak at this point, but come formal application and a formal public hearing, that will come. There's the avenue of bettertogetheredina.org. The applicants typically for sketch plan reviews have neighborhood meetings, either one or several, so there should be opportunities to participate in person. You can feel free to reach out to your elected official as well. With that, Carrie.
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the commission. And I'll mention that the developer has had neighborhood meetings, and we have received some feedback that we have.
I disagree with that, because I live in the building, I'm a tenant in the building, and I have not had one meeting or know anything about this. So I'm a main tenant in the building. So can you tell me where these meetings are held with me being the main tenant in the building?
We hear you. We'll let the applicant answer that question for sure. We'll expect an answer. Thank you.
So property is located at the intersection of Lincoln Drive and Londonderry. It's an aerial here. It's guided in the comprehensive plan for office and residential land uses. Current zoning is planned industrial district. It exists as an office building today. Here's an aerial shot of the site, and I show this. I just wanted to note that the 9 Mile Creek Regional Trail runs through here. So should this project or any redevelopment of this site, it's important to make those connections to the regional trail. Also want to point out that in our pedestrian network plan, the bike and pedestrian plan, there is plans for a shared use path along Lincoln to the north. So again, with any development of this site, we'd be looking for that shared use path separated from the roadway. So here's a rendering of basically a massing diagram of the proposal. And another. So the proposal would be to tear down the existing office building and build a 5-story, 89-unit apartment building. There potentially would be a future phase, a 52-unit building to the east. Within this project, they're suggesting 100% of the units would be affordable for families and individuals earning 60% of area median income. Commissioner Felt had asked a question about AMI and what that is. So I thought I would quick show this graphic of what 60% and 50% of AMI means. That is within the 7-county area, not just for Edina. So it's a single person at 60% earning $49,000, at 50% $41,000, and as you add to their members of the household, those income limits go up. So just to provide you a little detail in that regard. So here is a look at the site plan with access coming off of Lincoln. You can see the future phase 2. So some of the issues and considerations for the Planning Commission. The density proposed here is 54 units per acre. That includes phase 2. The site is about a little over 2.5 acres in size. The comp plan allows up to 75 units an acre, so it's not at the top end. Affordable housing. So this project would add 89 to 141 units of affordable housing. The city has established a goal with the Metropolitan Council to develop 992 to 1,800 new units by the year 2030. And we're far short of that goal at this point, but the additional units would help the city achieve that goal. As with all development projects, should an application be made, we would require a traffic and parking study to determine impacts. One of the main issues here is currently the city does not have the sewer capacity to serve this site. It's within the capital improvements plan to provide those upgrades in the future, but at this time, there's not adequate sewer to serve the site. So a possibility is that they could connect to the City of Minnetonka system. All of this would have to be paid for by the developer. That issue, Minnetonka would have to approve it, MnDOT and the Metropolitan Council. We would need to resolve that prior to any application being made. So it's a pretty big issue with the expense and providing that connection. In terms of building height, the proposed height here is 5 stories and does exceed our current code requirement of a 4-story maximum. With the fewer units in phase 2, perhaps that could be a 4-story building. I mentioned the pedestrian connections to the regional trail. Provided a compliance table in the staff memo to just indicate it was compared to the existing planned industrial district setbacks. So as you can see, they would be requesting flexibility from those standards on all lot lines along Lincoln, Londonderry, the Highway 169 side. Again, building height, they would need flexibility there too, as well as floor area ratio. We traditionally, with an all affordable housing project, the city has used the PUD zoning. The main purpose for that is with the PUD zoning district, we can require the affordable housing to last over a certain amount of years. So we write that right into the code to make sure that the project is for affordable housing. So with that, I will stop there, answer any questions you might have, but the development team is here as well to provide a little more detail.
Questions? We're just going to start down there. Thanks. Commissioner Olson.
Regarding the sewer capacity, so what happens 20 years from now? It just stays permanently with another city, or when we need to upgrade that infrastructure? How does that process work?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would assume that it would stick with that city and they would continue to pay those fees. Whether they would have an opportunity to cut that off, I guess it's a good question for the engineering teams.
Okay, I had a couple, Carrie, that I thought maybe would be beneficial for me, but also for the people here. And maybe you can just speak to each of them. Do you mind what I asked you earlier? Do you mind just saying, what's the ordinance for PUD criteria so that everybody knows and can kind of look at it and think about whether those criteria might be met?
Yeah, I don't have those right in front of me. Okay. I'd be glad to send them to you, but it's a list of criteria that needs to be met in terms of creative design, sustainability, sidewalks, pedestrian-friendly development, sustainability within the building, affordable housing. Yeah. And that's really the main piece here. Like I say, in the past, with 100% affordable housing projects, the one on 76th, the Aon project, the one at 4040 70th, and the one at Amundsen, PUD zoning was used for that 100% affordable housing project. But there is a list of standards that they would have to meet. Should they make a formal application, we would address those at that time.
Okay, yeah, because I know we've seen them many times before, and I was just kind of thought it would be a good reference point for everybody. Yep. 2 other kind of basic questions. One, is there a specific, like, project on Better Together right now, where a place where people can go if they want to compose some thoughtful comments and submit them at this stage about this sketch plan?
Not on Better Together.
Okay.
They would have to email myself. I can forward that to the city council, or people can, and they have done that, reach out directly, send emails to the city council.
Okay. And then lastly, more substantive, can you just explain when the project says it's going to be affordable for people earning 60% of AMI? What, just in plain English, like what does that mean that it's going to be affordable?
So nobody could live in that building if their income levels of that household exceeds the 60% threshold.
Does it mean anything particular about what the rents might be?
Yes. Yeah, I don't know what that exact number is, but they have to meet all of those criteria as well.
Yeah, one helpful thing to tag onto that is if you just Google Hennepin County AMI, the first thing that comes up gives a pretty good rundown of what those rents look like and everything else. So
Should have done the rents for you tonight.
no, it's all good. Commissioner Strauss or Bornstein, are you good?
I'm good.
All right, Commissioner Strauss.
Yeah, Director Teague, just to, along the Commission Member Olson's comment about the sanitary sewer capability there, do the properties, because Lincoln Drive continues, I mean, there's properties all east of 169, which I assume is that a city boundary then?
169 is the city
so
boundary.
That's
right.
essentially,
Yep.
right. So there's properties north of this site. Do they have the same sort of infrastructure issues that, I mean, if they were to expand or enlarge or things like that?
They would. Any housing within this area would be subject to that same issue. We need to upgrade the pipes to provide that capacity.
So, I mean, the solution is upgrading the facility. I mean, that's the fix. So when you take a property like this and say, okay, connect to Minnetonka, well, now you've got a hole that none of that property is would be interested, or a party to an improvement further. No, I mean, they've already made their commitment. I mean, sort of like that's where this issue of this connection and there was no. It was just mentioned as a possibility. I just kind of see that, just from my own experiences, is that now you've got a party that has no interest in paying for any improvements down the line. So then the properties down the line have to then pay. Say the pipes all have to be upgraded. So that's just I would expect that issue to be pretty thoroughly explained.
Yeah, it's up to the city to upgrade those facilities, right. So not necessarily at the expense of the development community when those properties redevelop. But because we don't have sewer available, they would have to pay for that connection to Minnetonka. We've had similar requests in the Cahill Industrial Park that we talked about earlier this evening. Mm-hmm. We had some requests for housing proposals there that came in for sketch plan, the same type of thing. At that time, we said that we don't have sewer capacity, and the project ended there. There was no options to connect to another city in those cases.
Well, I mean, I know that city staff will do a thorough review on that issue, but I know that kind of stuck out to me because I had, and then two issues in the same night where I hadn't even seen it. So that was just interesting.
Yeah, but that issue needs to be resolved really before an application is even made.
Yeah.
A formal application.
That's good for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Day.
Yeah, no question. I guess just wanted to clarify for the audience, since I always have this handy during our meetings. If you go on Google, you can just search the Edina City Code, and it's really easy to find once you get there to get to library.municicode.com. What we're talking about for PUDs is specifically in Chapter 36, Article 4, Division 2, Subdivision 3, And then that begins with section 36-253 is the planned unit development district guidelines and where all those stem from. So again, chapter 36, article 4, division 2, subdivision 3, and then it starts with section 36-253, if anybody wants to read those.
Crystal clear.
All right, just making sure.
Looking over here, any questions this direction? Commissioner Smith?
Yes. Thank you, Director Teague. Just a question on the height. I know the applicant wants to go 6 stories, but this is zoned to be 4 stories. But then you mentioned that in phase 2, they could put more units into phase 2, which would allow them to probably not go up to that 5-story height and maintain 4 stories, but then maybe phase 2 would be more units. Could you just give us some background on the impact of having a 5-story versus a 4-story on a property right close to Highway 169, and if there's any other properties nearby that have that same height concern?
Yeah, I'm trying to think on the Edina side, I can't think of tall buildings there. There are on the Minnetonka side. I can't think of any that would be, off the top of my head, 5 stories here on the Edina side.
Just one last question on that. Do you have any concerns, or would it be like a good idea, or like your recommendation essentially, to put more units into phase 2 to keep the height to 4 stories?
Yeah, it's probably a question for the developer. It's a good sized site, over 2.5 acres. It's certainly a reasonable requirement to say that we have to stay within that 4-foot height limit. Maybe they could get creative with a different site plan.
Thank you.
Commissioner Padilla?
Just a very quick clarification. When talking about the AMI, you talked about it being an earnings limitation and then an income limitation, and I think it is probably an income limitation, and I just want to clarify that.
Yes.
Not an earnings limitation. Okay, thank you.
And,
Yeah. So looking at the whole PID area that you just had on there before, so are the buildings in this area basically all of the same age and condition?
Yeah, I don't know precisely,
Right.
but I would guess just kind of looking at them.
Okay. So now we looked at one other apartment proposal before this one, right? In this
Yes.
location? Yeah.
Yes.
So has there been more developer interest in this area for redeveloping this parcel?
Yeah, I've had some inquiries for some of the sites to the north, I believe this one in particular, but nothing that ever even amounted to a sketch plan.
Okay. Was it industrial or something else?
Housing.
Housing. Okay. So is the city, because we just had this whole meeting where we're talking about Cahill District and keeping industrial, within parts of the city. Is the city interested in keeping this generally as industrial?
Yeah, so back when the comprehensive plan was done in 2008, it was at that time that the comp plan designation for this area changed to, it went from office to office and residential.
Okay.
So that decision was made with that comprehensive plan and then carried through with this last update.
Okay, so the comp plan is kind of out of whack with the actual zoning for this area.
It is in terms of residential, but the office uses still remain, so it's
available
it's
with the
consistent.
zoning. Okay.
Right.
All right. So, but what's going to happen here, though, is that a PUD is going to be sort of spot zoning for this because the area around it, because it's confusing because it's zoned industrial, the comp plan is guiding towards additional housing, but the city doesn't have the sewer capacity. I mean, it's like, this is sort of confusing.
Yes.
Is there a plan, so?
There is plans to upgrade the sewer capacity here. It'll it'll take a few years, but that is the plan to upgrade the system. So it can support housing in the future.
Okay. Because that's really, I'll give a quick preview of my concern is that, we're kind of spot zoning here, and we really don't have a plan for this area. This area, if you overlay 50th and France on here, is about the same size. And so we have a very detailed plan there. We have absolutely no plan here. So that's one of my concerns, but thank you.
Yeah, I would just add on to that. You recall we had a work plan item to identify these areas. I would suggest that we include that for our work plan next year, and I think we've talked about this area as being a possibility.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Felt?
Thanks. My question is similar to the comp plan in 2008 designated office residential. That was continued in the 2018 plan. So for 14 years, we've been saying, let's go residential over here. We haven't had it in the work plan. So once again, we're doing a PUD for something we've been trying to push residential over here for a while.
Yeah, and maybe it's a different zoning district. Maybe it's a planned resident district.
Yeah.
That's something to consider with a formal application. What's the appropriate zoning there?
Yeah, and maybe. Yeah.
I mentioned the PUD because that's been what we've used for an affordable housing project, because we can write that requirement right into the code so it sticks. It's a little more challenging under a different zoning district.
Yeah, and I understand about the PUD allows us to control the hoped for project.
Right.
So, and then the other, because I had asked questions, so I want to bring it up so it's on the record. I had asked questions about the wastewater too. And it's my understanding the applicant will pay for the sewage to Minnetonka, and they pay for the sanitary access fee and the waste access fee, and they pay that directly to Minnetonka. So there's no cost to City of Edina to have them connect to Minnetonka, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then you had mentioned this. So currently, right now, there is bicycle access under 169.
The 90.
Yes.
I believe that is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. The 9 Mile Creek Trail.
Last time I wrote it, it wasn't there. Right. So my thought is, if this is affordable housing, making sure that there are ways that people can kind of get across 169 to those light rail stations, or to bike west, or to bike east, or to get on rail. So I want to make sure, and with the applicant having to kind of make sure that those connections are to their site, or from their site to would be helpful.
Right.
Is there a good way to kind of walk across that bridge?
There's a sidewalk, whether you'd consider it a good way to walk across, maybe not.
In the summer, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Another part of it is, we want to connect this neighborhood up here to the north eventually so they can get down to that trail as well with this path.
Okay. Thank you.
Just one maybe question clarification for you. So just curious about the mechanisms for communication to different parties, different residents or developers. So if a developer owns or looks at this site, they see what it's zoned for, they see what it's guided for, and they make a gamble on it. Where is the public information for them to find out that the sewer capacity isn't achievable? Is that hard to find?
They find out when they contact staff.
And so just thinking out of, how to be more transparent, it seems like those kind of things should be maybe heavily outlined on certain parts of our city resources. I don't know. It seems like if you're interested in making a move and then you get slapped with this, it seems a little unfair.
Yeah, it's the issue of changing land use, going to residential. Needs a lot more sewer capacity.
That's what triggers it. But,
Yep.
I mean, even if there were a similar industrial or office that was maxed out, could that also exceed the threshold too? Or
From what
likely
I'm
not?
hearing from engineering in terms of this light industrial office type use,
It would not.
It'd be okay.
Okay. That's about the only question I had. Any other questions, comments? All right, we will welcome the applicant team. It looks like we have 3 people here from Solheim. You can come up podium, introduce yourselves and show us what you got.
I'll just stand here. Good evening, commissioners. My name is Kurt Gunsbury. Several of you folks are new since we were here for our last project. I am the CEO of Solheim Companies. Petro Migitz is our architect from Cass Wilson. Nick Conniff, architect as well, and Amol Dixit, and Catherine Gunsbury, my wife and business partner. Let's see, we are at sketch plan review, really for rezoning to a PUD, just like you've heard from Carrie Teague. And the folks who are on the commission who saw us last time reviewed a much larger apartment building for the same site, very different design. And Commissioner Bennett, to your point, we didn't find out till much later that the sewer capacity wasn't there. We have repurposed this project because we do have site control. We have site control for a very long time, which is unusual and very difficult to achieve. And one of the preconditions for affordable housing is to have very long site control for years, potentially, because that's how long it takes to get the capital in place to build affordable housing. We are Solheim Companies. We build beautiful, sustainable communities that people love. We've built over 20 large apartment communities in the Twin Cities, primarily in Minneapolis and also in Edina. We have 2 projects in Edina. One is a 400-unit apartment complex on 77th Street. And we have a second phase of that project going in, which is 276 units, which starts in a month or so. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me better? Thanks. How's this? Yeah. So we have a track record of building sustainable buildings throughout the metro. And I think you've seen in the slides that we are presenting. Petro's going fast through them. I think you guys can all read them on your screen. I don't need to read for you. You can see what we've got there. But our buildings and our ethos is a really good fit for Edina. That's what we found to date. Because of the type of buildings that we build, they're desirable by the folks that live in them. And they definitely meet and or exceed the climate action goals that Edina has set out for itself. I'd say another aspect of our business is we have a solar investment company called Renew 22. We are actually grid net positive with the energy that we produce. So we produce more solar energy than we use in all the buildings, almost 3,000 units that we've built in the metro. And I think that's what I'm going to hand off to you, Petro.
Yeah, perfect. Thank
All
you.
right.
Grab that. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Again, Petro Megitz, Cass Wilson Architects, 1301 American Boulevard, Bloomington. Carrie took a lot of my thunder here today, so thank you. But in general, really, I'd just like to talk really briefly as to our initial, very early design approach to the site. Really, when we were looking at the building, again, it's a 2.59 acre site. looking as a total of 141 units, roughly 54 units an acre, 5 stories of housing, 2 levels of covered parking, which roughly equates to about 1.27 parking stalls a unit. Again, we mentioned a few times about the building height here. Hopefully this is loud enough. Here, for building height being roughly 72 feet. Now, again, that's going to be dependent on where grades land when we're done with the design of the project. And we've already spoken quite a bit to the sewer access. Now, looking at the overall site, we're going to be looking for some of your guidance and ideas and approaches as to what you think is best in terms of organizing the site itself. Right now, what our intent was to move the building as close as possible to Highway 169, which is planned north in this image. To try to, again, be respectful to our neighbors to plan south, which would be the townhome neighbors on our east side. Again, fully understand we'll have to work out all the pedestrian connections, all the bike trail connections, all connections for multimodal connectivity. The projects will be designed to MHFA and Green Community Standards. That's one of the funding requirements for us to move forward. Not only just the zoning, city zoning and building code requirements, but on top of that, as Kurt has mentioned earlier, this does mean that our energy sustainability for the project will be higher than what Minnesota requires, just from the get-go as a base design. The project will be designed for solar voltaic ready, so again, the infrastructure will be in place for future installation as necessary. At this point, again, there's lots of flexibility in this layout. We're looking for some of your feedback, and we'll just stand here for any questions or comments.
Look in either direction. Who would like to start? Thank you. All right, Commissioner Day.
Okay, so I guess the first thing, there's quite a few, but the 5-story proposal, right? So knowing that that goes directly against the 4-story requirement, why 5 stories? Why not? Why? Just like to hear that addressed.
Of course. So one of the main issues is we're actually have a very high percentage of 2s, 3s, and 4s. So therefore, to get the unit count on the site, and the units are large because again, we're designing to MHFA requirements. So therefore, their minimum bedroom sizes, minimal living room sizes. The building itself has grown more than what a market rate building would be. So now to accommodate, to get enough units, to get the rents, to make the project actually pencil out, we had to go vertical. Now, there could be some negotiations to see if we can maybe move some of the units to the phase 2 project, if it goes forward, but we'd have to look at that and explore that a little bit further.
Okay. I'm going to continue. So I'll move on to the sewage question, right? So obviously it's not, if you're paying for sewer access and you have to coordinate that with Edina, Minnetonka, the Met Council, right? How does that fit into, I guess, the financial return on an investment like this, right? I mean, where does the funding for that come from? How do you work that out? I'm curious.
So this is affordable housing, so financial return isn't the primary consideration. It's can we actually get enough capital to build it to the requirements? Mm-hmm. We don't, I'm not sure if this matters or not for Planning Commission, but this isn't a market rate building. We're not paid the same way. It's not an investment in the same way.
I understand.
So it really is, it's a project cost that we look at, and can it be supported? What we know from working with the city engineer is the project cost is not as high as you might think. It's in the several $100,000 range, which is, in a project this size, something that can be covered within the total project cost. The downside is that money is going to have to come from grants, right? Because it's not coming from rents, because the rents are constrained. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah. I guess I'll add on to it then, right? So you said you own most of this site right now, right?
We have site control. We do not own it.
Okay.
It's under purchase
site control.
Yep.
All right. There's not at this stage, right? I know there's probably going to be. Do you plan on like having this be a little bit more of an iterative process in terms of coming back to us with after this initial stage?
Yes.
I'd say the constraint is, though, that as we apply to all the different funding agencies, there's 5, 6, 7 potential funding groups that come into this. We can't actually iterate because we have to stick with general parameters on unit size, unit count, those types of things. So we have less flexibility far less flexibility than we do on a market rate project, like 80% less.
Okay.
Yeah, so hence why we're hoping the site plan, again, if we have some flexibility with setbacks or what have you, so we can move buildings, give a little bit more green space or what have you, if we get some flexibility that way, it does make it a lot easier to add some of the other site amenities or what have you to the project.
Okay. Well, then I guess really some advice for future discussions with us. Please. In terms of, we had just in our last meeting a review of an apartment proposal over in Grandview, right? And they went through and read the PUD ordinance and said, here's all the requirements to meet the PUD 1 through 9, right? And here's how we feel that we meet them without much to go on in terms of any kind of sketch or proposal right now. I would hope that we would have at least a direct addressment of that, so it makes that a bit more of a black and white decision, right? Okay.
Hear loud and clear.
Yep. Okay. And then the last thing around is, of course, I guess contentious area right now tonight, right, is the community involvement and how that has been handled so far. And I'm just curious what information has been given out, how has it been given out, and how do you plan on continuing to give it out?
So we've had one community meeting so far. It was last Friday. It was, I'd say, pretty heavily attended by the neighborhood. We plan to keep communicating with neighbors. We don't have a plan right now because this is, like I said, this is a very long-term process. We may not come back for actually site plan for quite a while because we have to work out the sewer issue. So this is really very, very preliminary, what we're presenting to you.
Sure.
So.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Strauss.
Yeah, thank you. So it's referred to as 100% affordable housing. It's 100%, or can it be some other percent, or is that not your model for this kind of project?
So given the costs of the site, of the sewer connection, other things, this has a significant amount of deeply affordable housing, not just affordable housing. To get the dollars needed to build this, it is a 100% affordable project. We reviewed this with the Edina Housing Trust, went through a similar set of questions, just how can we create a balance within this building. We've decided that really the only path forward for this site is 100% affordable.
Thank you.
Commissioner Olson.
Thank you. You do excellent work, so I think if this were to move forward, you would be the kind of developer I would like to see do 100% affordable housing. But my question really for you today is, because usually when we do sketch plan reviews, we've got a little bit more to work with. What specifically are you seeking feedback on from us? Are you asking, is 5 stories just kind of a no-go? Like, what are the specifics that you would like from us, given that we don't have a lot to respond to?
Yeah, great question. I'd say the PUD is the primary question. Is PUD the right process? We've done 2 PUDs in Edina already. We're very familiar with the process. We understand all the boxes we need to check, and I think we'll have an appropriate plan for a PUD. But I think that's really the question, and I understand all the zoning concerns, long-term, short-term, and frankly, the sewer is the driving question behind all of this. And we did actually, I just want to expound on that a little bit. We did get an estimate from the engineering department for a sewer connection within Edina. It was $13 million. So clearly nothing that would ever work for that to develop that street at all for future anything, right? So Minnetonka really is the only path forward right now until Edina decides they want to, until you decide you'd like to invest $13 million to light up this street with new sewage, right? So, or a new sewage connection. That was the wrong way to say that.
Well, I guess then, from my perspective, I think people on this commission know height doesn't freak me out. 5 stories is fine. I think we desperately need affordable housing in this community. As a renter, knowing what I pay, I can't imagine anyone who would like to live in this community and take advantage of it, being able to afford to live here. So from what I see, of course, it's very preliminary. I would be supportive of this project.
Thank you. Just one other comment about height, because I think that's a fair question too, the 5 stories, 4 stories. The reason we've pushed the 5 stories toward the 169 side is because of shadowing. That's the primary concern typically with height. And by pushing it to the far back side of the lot, it has effectively the same shadowing effect as a 4-story building that's on the front side of the lot. So just, we'll bring that to, we'll bring drawings that explain that better in the future, but just to keep that in mind.
Yes, and Commissioner Olson, the other question really we're looking for is there flexibility on setbacks? Can we push this building a little bit further to the street, to the highway, to, again, respect the neighbors, to give them that space that they're looking for, and then also just provide more space for green areas in our site?
It's hard to conceptualize without seeing it. And and I appreciate that you're here early trying to get that so that you know how to plan. I would probably defer to sort of what staff would want to recommend for that. But if it helps move the project forward and get the neighborhood on board, which I think will be a challenge, then I would be flexible and open to that. But I'm just one person, so.
Of course. Thank you.
Others, please. Commissioner Bornstein.
So realistically, if you figure the sewer situation out, and when is the soonest, what's the timeline that might apply to this project in terms of when you actually might be coming back here asking for a more formal recommendation? You're talking about years or months?
I think in terms of coming back to you, it'd probably be closer to, December, January to start this process going all the way. And then by the time we actually go through full design drawings and what have you, we wouldn't even conceptually break ground until probably summer, fall of next year. If at the earliest, if we're lucky.
Much later. It depends on the financing. We have all these grants that we have to get.
That's what I'm saying, the earliest.
It could be 2-3 years just to get the grants. Even if we had your approvals, we may not have the grants in place.
Yeah, this is very long process.
Yeah, that was kind of the impression I was getting as people were referring to it.
I'm an optimist by heart, so I always want to work towards a little faster, but it's going to take quite a bit to get the funding in place.
Okay. Well, personally, on that, you were asking questions about how do we feel. I don't think anyone can speak for everybody, but on some of the flexibility we may have with setbacks, height, whatever.
Yep.
I'm personally open to flexibility with those, especially at this location, just because some of these deviations don't seem that significant. But I think what I would be looking at, and maybe to Commissioner Olson's point, it's a little bit hard to assess at this phase.
Of course.
The flexibility that's given should be used to hit as many of the other, and you guys know this already, PUD criteria as you can. So what's the public gaining by allowing the flexibility on the setbacks or the height? In addition to just an affordable, which is important, but in addition to just a fully affordable project.
Yeah. And again,
we're not there yet but that's what we're going to want, I think, at least I'm going to want to react to. And I know you guys know that. And I think that for me would be like a determinative factor in, whether to support it.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Felt. We'll go this way. Commissioner Smith.
Thank you. I appreciate coming up here and getting some early feedback. Just 2 questions for now. I think based on the information that you provided, there's something called the alcove. I think that's a studio. Is that the studio apartments?
It would be, yes, correct.
Okay. And just what are your thoughts on, how did you determine, a 4-bedroom, 8 4-bedroom units, I think, and 18 studios? What was kind of the thinking or the math behind the amount of units, the size, the bedroom sizes, differentiation within the building?
Okay, so there's a giant algorithm that we don't fully have control of or always understand. It's political in many ways. When we apply for grants, each of those grants has a point system. Within that point system, they'll value a 4-bedroom more highly than a 3-bedroom, for example. But they may grade a alcove the same as they grade a 1-bedroom. We have to have a mix of units that allows for not just one grant, but 5 different grants. So we have 5, I'm just grabbing 5 out of the air because I have 5 fingers. So 5 different agencies we're seeking grants from, each with very different requirements, hopes, and dreams, right? One wants only 3 and 4 bedroom units. Obviously, we can't serve that one with this project, right? But if we have enough 3 and 4 bedroom units, we can check the box and qualify for their grant. One may want supportive housing, right, for people who need extra support in their home. That's maybe a larger 1-bedroom unit, very different than your 3 and 4 bedroom grantee, right, or grantor. So it's really, it's a giant spreadsheet where we're trying to hit all the points all the time. We're literally reviewing the points in our meetings to make sure that the granting agency is going to be happy when we get there. By the time we get to the granting agency, the rules might change and there might be a different political representative making the decision. That's how affordable housing works. Very complicated. To answer your question, it's not how we do market rate housing.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I'm so glad you pointed it out. So basically, if I'm hearing correctly, depending on who the granting agency is, if you have 5 or 1, they could essentially drive the bedroom sizes. So we could have more units or less units potentially the next time you guys come.
This is why we have 89 right now, because it works with the mix that we have.
Gotcha.
So changing it to 88 might lose us a granting agency.
And if I could just add also, the bedroom sizes, living room sizes are driven by MHFA standards. So they have specific, you have to be 9'6" or 10'6", 11'6" in terms of clear dimensions. So again, when we're looking at a building layout design, a lot of that is driving how big these buildings are. Unlike a market rate building where you can shrink a few of these things out and be a little bit more creative, they have very prescriptive ways of how you have to hit to qualify for that checklist. Yeah, your hands are kind of tied in some ways.
Gotcha. And just one last question, just to kind of tag on to, I think, what I heard previously. I know in the PUD, sustainability is a key factor. I think you guys also mentioned, and you also presented, that you build buildings sustainably, you have investments in solar properties, etc. With this building in particular, could you maybe list out some of those sustainability items that you're considering putting into this building? Appliances,
Yes, of course. So we, for sure, Energy Star appliances, high efficiency mechanical systems, some of the highest R valued walls and roof systems as well. You'll have Energy Star windows. I mean, you name it. Like I mentioned, we'll have photovoltaic systems in place in terms of the backbone for those systems. So again, when those panels actually start being a little bit more cost effective, we can start installing them on the buildings without having to rip up buildings or anything. And then again, low flow fixtures, low VOC paints, adhesives. The construction process is also going to be monitored. There'll be very minimal waste on site because it has to get recycled. Typically goes through atomic recycling, and that's a local group that does that. So again, very prescriptive. You have to follow all these rules to do these types of projects.
Yeah, I think that's going to be really important for this city. You know, our sustainability goals is such a big deal here. And if we want to give some of that flexibility on the setbacks, etc., you know, we certainly would be looking for those other items to be put in place. So I really appreciate you guys sharing that.
Oh, of course. And another thing, just even from a site perspective, again, we're, drought-resistant plants. I mean, it's to that detail that we have to go to. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Padilla.
Well, thank you for the introduction. Appreciate it. Just have a couple questions. Is the building that's there currently occupied?
Yes.
And do you know how many employees or how many people work there?
I don't exactly know, no.
Okay.
We have a relocation planner that we're working with for the businesses, so we haven't reached out to the businesses about it. Again, we're in a very, very early stage to even consider that question.
But it is multiple businesses, and
Yes,
it's currently
correct.
occupied. Thank you. And the height, I assume, doesn't include the solar array, right? So if it was 5 stories, there'd be a few additional feet based upon the solar array on top?
Yeah, not necessarily. It would be on, again, we would be thinking a flat roof especially.
But
so
it's
it'd be,
flat.
Yep.
Okay.
Again, to try to reduce that height. We're very
But
understanding.
there's a flat roof with a
Parapet.
with
Yep.
a parapet, and the parapet is typically about the height of the solar.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so in kind of following up on Commissioner Smith's, with this dynamic amount of 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units potentially, and then you're looking at 1.27 parking spots per unit. I'm thinking that's kind of skinny on the parking, particularly for anything over a 2-bedroom.
It's a good question. The 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms are for families, so really they're planned for people with children who don't drive. So our assumption is that actually what we've seen in other affordable housing developments is there's excess parking compared to the actual parking need. So, and Edina has relatively high parking requirements compared to other metros. Within a PUD, I believe we have flexibility to determine the number of parking stalls as well. But we are, business plan-wise, we're not concerned about having too little parking. We're actually concerned about having too much parking, paying for something that we won't be using.
But that includes, spaces for deliveries and guest parking and things like that.
Yes.
Even with guest parking. Okay. And does this complicated algorithm you're working with include amenities, or do you plan on, does it give you room for amenities like fitness and community and pool and things like that?
There are points for everything. We try to address every one of those categories. Just like with the PUD points, it's the same for these plans.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Miranda.
Okay, great. So you want to talk about setbacks and kind of building structure and whatnot. So if I were going to live here, I see this tot lot like adjacent to a freeway and an on-ramp, and I'm like, that's probably, from a number of reasons, a car careening off the thing or pollution or whatever. And just the overall plan for it. I know it's very preliminary, and you're just getting size and whatever, but it would seem like, and because it's right next to a trail that's walkable and bikeable and whatever, and there's, a restaurant and coffee shop across the street. There's retail in the area. So it would seem that, from my perspective, it would seem that like pushing this out to the edges of the property, because there's, across the street is
Forest.
Yeah. So there's no single-family house across the street that's going to be offended by this or whatever. So it would seem like it would be better and make the area more walkable, and so people would have to have less cars. If you did push it out to the street and you kind of had like a courtyard or something where, little children could have a safe area to play that's not noisy and that's not toxic. So I would prefer that sort of thing, and even to the point where, or if you had excess space in the back by the north on the, what do you call that, north on the plan? Mm-hmm. Use that for surface parking rather than having it, in the middle where you might want to have a courtyard for residents and or children or whatever. So it would seem like having, dare I say this, a kind of European style building, where the interior space becomes the usable space rather than acres of green on the outside that nobody is going to use, right? So I'd prefer that kind of design for this sort of thing, and I think that would allow still to have a higher building in the back and lower in the front. So I think that would make that better that way. It would make the parking less prominent I know you have a problem. It looks like you don't want a ramp in the garage because it would take up too much space. It looks like you're trying to get two different places to go into it. So I don't know how you would fix that or whatever, but it would seem like, anything you could get that, I mean, the entrance off to the side is nice, but anything you keep parking away from the front of the building and just have it, somewhere else, I think would be really good, make this a much better project. The whole TBD Phase 2 thing, if there were some sort of, pedestrian walkway or something between the two buildings or a plaza or something that would be useful and pleasant, would be really nice. In terms of the height, and the density, I think it's fine. This is like a perfect location for it. I mean, you wouldn't want to build this in the middle of Parkwood Knolls. I mean, it doesn't make sense. But here on the edge, where it's right next to a freeway, I think is there are equity issues about that in terms of pollution and whatnot, but I think for now, this is within Edina, this is a good place to build this. I'm not concerned about the parking at all. If anything, I agree with you. I think you'll probably end up with too much parking. What else was I going to say? In terms of no, that was for the city. Let's see here. So as the city's affordable housing coordinator mentioned in her letter, the Opus stop for the Southwest Light Rail or Green Line extension, which will be open because this is taking so long. It actually will be open before you guys start this. Is close by. And again, that's another reason where we could drive down car usage is that, light rail is way better than buses, right? So it's a great way to get around. Goes right to downtown Minneapolis, goes to St. Paul, goes to the airport. So that seems like a really great amenity for you guys. And having the trail that either goes underneath 169, which they just improved last year, or the current trail, which goes kind of over, uses the sidewalk, whatever, is great for that. So my big concern, and again, this is as much on the city as it is, it's not really on you, it's on the city, but I'm very much for affordable housing, and I think this is a good location for it because we do have it interspersed in the city, but we have none in this area. You guys do good work. I agree with Commissioner Olson that you do really quality stuff. But it would be even more walkable if the city actually had a plan for what this district north of you and south of you even, there's, that district might be redeveloped too. But there's a lot of pressure in this area. And so I think if you knew more of what would be there, it could guide your development a little bit better. And I always ask for this, and everyone from affordable housing, because of grants, whatever, says it's not possible, but having a little coffee shop or ice cream shop in the corner, along the trail would be really nice. I know it's like government regulations don't allow it or whatever, but it seems like we need to change that as a society. But basically, I'm very much in favor of this. I think the city has work to do to make this fit in better with the neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Miranda.
Commissioner Felt.
Commissioner Miranda always takes the words right out of my mouth. Courtyard and that tot lot location. And so I would be flexible about the setbacks if we could, for me, I like to see orthogonal buildings that kind of splay out kind of drive me. When you see the overall of all the buildings and all the individual, if we kind of start kind of pulling them into more orthogonal shapes, I think they age better. So if we could do that and kind of push it up on the plan or west, I'd be flexible on the setbacks. And then I drove the site today, and there's a pretty steep grade going to the east. So the residential, which is a higher residential apartment buildings or condos, are not, on the east of that is kind of down farther. So I'd be more flexible, kind of pushing that 5 stories back, so we could step it down to those residences. And there's residential, you can't drive through to the north, but on the north side, there are 4-story apartment buildings. I mean, there might be a trail through there at some point in time, but there are 4-story apartment buildings in the neighborhood. Okay. Yeah, well, you can't drive through, but yeah. So I do have questions. You were talking about the companies that give you grants. So do they have requirements or families? Because you've got the alcoves and 4 bedrooms. Is another requirement that is all for families?
So they're not companies. These are all government grants.
Yeah, okay.
Or low-income housing tax credits, right?
Yeah.
So very much provided by us, right?
Mhm.
So they each have different requirements. And like I said, some will be wholly focused on 3 and 4 bedroom units, and some will be wholly focused on supportive housing for studios or 1 bedrooms. Did I answer your question? I'm sorry. I want to make sure I heard it correctly.
Yes. It sounds like some people, the 3 and 4 bedroom is for families, right? So there's some agencies.
That's their motivation. They can't require that it be
Yeah.
families. It could be
Yeah.
3 unrelated people, 4 unrelated people. But the motivation is that there is not enough large family affordable housing available in the Twin Cities, even just as housing stock, period, right? So
Yeah.
most of our housing stock is, unless it's very expensive housing, is built for smaller families.
Yeah. Good, because I asked, what's the starting salary of a teacher here in Edina? What's the starting salary of a police here in Edina? I talked to my baristas today, and I'm like, okay, what does the shift manager make? $40,000. What does the manager make? $50,000. The manager at my local coffee shop, has 2 kids. So there's 3 people, $50,000. So I too want to support families for this. And so that was the question about the families. But then, okay, I want to get to the grade change, because you had talked in there a little bit about there is some grade on this site too, and that kind of helps with your parking. Are you planning on both? One parking being underground and one being on level, or?
So we have 2 levels of underground parking for the 89-unit building.
Okay.
But the hill plays a very important role, because the lower we can locate our drive-in, the less expensive it is to build the building, and the ramps are not taking up internal space for parking, right? So the hill is a very important aspect of this site for anything that we propose to you, because it is very steep. I think it's almost 15 feet grade change, right? Which is very steep for any site that we would work on, which really will suggest to us that there are going to be things that we do that you're not going to like, because you're looking at it in plan view right now. But if you went to the site and saw how much it sloped, you'd be like, okay, I get it. That makes sense, what you're trying to do here. Just because we want to build it feasibly, we want to build it in a way that it doesn't harm neighbors with sun shadowing, things like that. And in ways that we want to take advantage of spaces that are away from the freeway, even though obviously we're pushing the building very close to the freeway. So lots of, just like with any site, there are complexities. The slope is the biggest complexity on this site.
Okay. You got my tot lot question. In the courtyard, it was the same thing. Animate the courtyard to the neighborhood. So if the tot lot is in the courtyard, or if there's green space in the courtyard, or if there's gathering space in the courtyard, if we can't animate it through a coffee shop or a mom and pop or something like that, animate it through activities happening there. And
I think our biggest concern that we've seen with other affordable projects, anybody who has kids, balls are a problem, right? Where do the balls go? Because of this slope, we're challenged by that. Because of the highway, we're challenged by that.
Yeah.
We can put in a wall, right, along the highway. That is one option. It's expensive, but that's something we can do. Pretty typical on lots of on-ramps around the Twin Cities, and Edina especially.
Yeah.
So there are solutions, but to answer your question, yes, a courtyard would be preferable, but we have to make the parking efficient then and not have too much drive lane that's kind of eating up all the surface area of the lot. Right?
And if that's the case, pulling the building back the west side of it back so you can push the tot lot away from the intersection, because idling cars and pollution.
Right.
Every time I drive by a tot lot on the interstate, oh my God, I can't believe it. Sorry. Okay. I support families. I want them to be able to kind of drive to their jobs here. I want them to be able to walk across the street and work at the coffee shop. So.
Thank you, Commissioner Feldman.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ryan, did you have anything to add?
No.
Sarah? Okay. I have a few things. So first, I mean, kind of like you guys being surprised to find out about the sewer. I don't think it, feels good for occupants of the existing structure or maybe nearby residents to be surprised about the project either. And certainly that's what's kind of coming across tonight. So I think lessons learned is, however you can be more proactive about communicating, even if it's this early on, to people who are going to be extremely affected, because maybe it would have tempered some concerns knowing this might be 3 years out. So I think that just needs to be said. And then regarding the neighborhood meeting specifically, what type of notice went out for that? Was it mostly for surrounding residents and excluded on-site people? Or how was it advertised? Yeah.
We actually received, Hi, everybody. My name is Amol Dixit. I live in city of Minneapolis, Linden Hills neighborhood. For the neighborhood meeting, which we had last Friday, I actually worked with the city office and got a list of names and addresses of residents and businesses within 1,000 feet of the site. I did not do a check to see if it included the tenants of the office building. It was the list provided to me by the city. And so mail notices went out to everyone on that list. It was about 100 people or so.
Okay, so I mean, if we could get to the bottom of it separately, I think we owe it to the community if people were left out.
Yeah, we only have list of, and it comes from Hennepin County data, the property owners.
Okay, so not necessarily. Okay, so it's just something as you guys do other projects, and as we look back with hindsight being 2020, do that next time.
Noted.
All right. I guess one of the big questions that came up was PUD, and so just trying to think of appropriateness of policy. This is kind of a question for both. What else could they do here besides conditional use permit? Kidding. What else is?
It would be rezoning to a multifamily residential zoning district. So it would be the PRD district, planned residential district. And we have 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Okay. Or PUD.
Or PUD.
Essentially. Okay. No conditional use permit?
No.
Good. Okay.
That's only for commercial zoning districts.
I just want to be clear. Okay. All right, that helps understand also why you guys did PUD on 2 other projects is likely the same choice.
Could I ask just a clarifying question?
Sure.
If we were to go with the PRD approach, obviously we'd be asking for variances for setbacks or heights or any. So then again, it's a separate process, I would assume. Please correct me.
Should be same.
It's the same process, but yes, variances would be included.
I guess the key distinguishing factor that we know about PUD and residential O2 compared to PRD is we can add much more binding language as far as time and use. And if it changes, then you'd have to come before a commission. Right. So there is, if you're doing something affordable, there's a benefit for PUD because it locks that value into the city for a long time. What is the time frame? 20, 30 years? So what have we seen before?
Yes.
20, 30?
Yeah,
I feel like
we've seen 20, 30. It can vary.
So I'd say clarify what that time frame is. That helps provide reassurance to Did you say 75 years?
No, this kind of ties back to the point Kurt was making earlier about all the funder priorities.
Yeah.
And so what we have built into our model is at least 30 years of
Okay.
affordability. So if it's 20 or 30 years, we'll be able to meet that.
Okay. Speaking of timing, that's my next question. So you mentioned purchase agreement. Are you able to keep that going for 3 years before or are you going to have to pull the trigger before you get all the funding necessary if you're feeling good tailwind?
We'll see, but right now we do have enough time in the purchase agreement to move ahead the way we anticipate.
Okay. And then should it be 2 to 3 years out and you get approvals, is there a potential for phase 1 and phase 2 to overlap, or would that happen sequentially regardless?
We're not sure. That's my answer. It could be that one funding agency catches up. Just to back up a little bit, the way the funding agencies look at it is they want to disperse funding across cities throughout the metro, throughout the state. So if they're funding one project in Edina, they don't want to fund a second project in Edina. It's really that simple. It'd be way easier for us to just build 141 units, right?
Yep.
But breaking it into separate buildings allows us to take advantage of different grant cycles for each of the 2 buildings.
And just so for my own clarification, if you went down the PUD route and it was approved, I mean, that's in phases, right? So it would just be for phase 1, and then there would be a separate PUD approval, or is it a site plan approval for phase 2?
It would be a site plan approval for phase 2.
And you're aware of that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. I think you've answered the other pieces before, so basically the size, 89 is kind of the driving factor to get to 141. The height, I wanted to talk about that. You mentioned it, and I'm not going to speak for everyone, but at least personally, height for me isn't necessarily about shadowing. That's an important consideration, but for me, it's much more about the massing, potential imposition of how it feels to the street, as well as just the shape defines a character of the building. So how you do your height, where you put it, how you articulate your building can make your building a lot more attractive, and that's what I would expect here. You guys have done good work, but I would, yes, have the higher parts right on the freeway, or looming over the freeway versus looming over the neighborhood. Step it down, even if it's a story, or even if it's features that make it look like that. You got a hill, work with the hill. How things, okay, I'm okay with the height. The variance setbacks also okay with, again, pushing things toward the perimeter, but mostly toward the perimeter no one is really going to care about, at least minus you and your occupants, which would be along the frontage road as well as Lincoln Drive, however you can expand that. And how that ties into kind of the design is, as I look at this, I know we're very preliminary speaking. Phase one and phase 2 don't even look like the same project. Phase 2 just looks like a very simple, basic building that we see too much of, a rectangular box. So by that time, if phase 2 is even better than an idea, think of how you can articulate it like you did with phase 1, even slightly. I shared the recommendation of a courtyard style to kind of protect occupants. I'm trying to figure out how you do it best, knowing that, and here's another recommendation. Maybe make plan north, compass north, just so we can understand, south is where the sun's coming from. And if you just looked at this, you'd be like, oh, look, the parking lot would be a great place for a courtyard, but that would actually be shrouded most of the day from the sun. So how do you do that well? Do you do an L the other way, open it up more to Lincoln Drive with a bunch of trees? You have the height, so you can have an elevated platform. But I think however you can fence in with landscaping in your building, that place to gather is better. than where the tot lot's shown. I mean, I thought that was kind of a joke. So I was going to give you props on that one. It's a good laugh. And I guess on that note, if you need to consider parking and relocating parking, I don't know. I mean, there's existing parking that's beyond that dash line, which I guess is a setback. I would encourage parking to just stay along the freeway, because you're not going to want people hanging out there, and you can't push your building much closer to that, or you're getting negative variances. So I'd say get creative that way. And then with the drive entrances to each of the garages, just shorten those up if it needs to be a quick spur or 2 curb cuts, just to kind of limit parking lots running through a potential courtyard or a place people are going to want to bike or balls are going to fly. I would say that is it for me. And I just want to thank all the community that came out to listen to the sketch plan review right now. And unfortunately, when a development is on the table, or a potential one, it's a bit reactive for our potential to affect change. So what we're trying to do, and what was alluded to earlier, and we're doing in other areas, are these small area plans where we're trying to get an idea as a community about how we want to see change in a certain location. So had that been done here, and the community all got to weigh in, business owners and occupants got to chime in, we could maybe feel a little better about this direction that's on the table, which I support because the comprehensive plan is guiding toward residential. You have residential to the south, you have it to the east. This is perfect for affordable, the proximity and access, so I support it that way. It's hard to react when we don't have a little more design to react to. Last piece, Carrie mentioned shared use path, so I think just the only other thing is how this does tie into neighboring sites. So if that, just when you're recalibrating your design, figure out a more beautiful way to tie into a path. Maybe it brings people onto your site along the top of the hill versus down below. I mean, you could get creative. That's all I have. Any other comments? Yeah, Commissioner Felt.
Just quickly, when you were talking about tightening up the drive, I wanted to ask a question about why there's so much distance between Phase 1 and Phase 2? Because you've got the road coming up and turning into
We're leaving room for parking.
Room for parking in front of Phase 2?
Yes.
Okay.
Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, as you were talking through it, I was just thinking to myself, why are you guys doing this? What's the motivation? It seems like there's not a huge financial return. You're so used to commercial properties. Just what's the real motivation for and going through this endeavor, challenging and struggling with grant writing and all that. So that's part one. And then just part two, is it just development or development and management is what you guys will be taking on? So just kind of the motivation and just the ongoing management of the property.
So motivation is last summer, my wife Catherine and I made a decision that we would move into affordable housing because we've actually been very successful in market rate housing. Part of our hope was that we could bring really efficient design and construction efficiencies to the affordable market in the same way that we've done with our other market rate housing. Honestly, I think we're really good at it. We owe it to our community to build this housing. I'm a former teacher. I have a master's in special education of all things, so here I am. But my deepest experience is with development. And like I said, I want my kids to grow up to live. I have two 21-year-olds. I want my children to live in a community where they can afford to live if they're working as a teacher, if they're working as a gas station manager. I don't want them to feel excluded from Edina or anywhere. And we have the firepower to do this. And if we're struggling with this, which we are, Commissioner Smith, this is very difficult work. I think it helps you understand why it is so hard, so difficult to get anywhere with affordable housing in our state, in Edina, in our individual neighborhoods. So that's, for me, the motivating part. Will we make it? I don't know. We have 4 projects we're working on right now because we look at it as a volume problem. We're always developing, so we're just adding a division to our company to do that, and that's one of the reasons we brought Amol on to carry this forward. And do you want to answer the other question?
Property management, yeah. We are, so for the market rate developments that Solheim has built, Solheim does the property management, but we fully understand and appreciate the unique challenges of property management in the affordable space. So we're partnering with a firm, they're called Property Solutions and Services, PSS. They have 35 years plus of experience of managing affordable properties exclusively. So they're on board with all the projects that we're currently working on.
Commissioner Felt.
You mentioned your children working here, and I think you hit the nail on the head when, whatever they do, if they're working, and all work has dignity in it. So thank you.
Thanks. Just want to add, that was a great question by Commissioner Smith, and thank you for the answer. You could hear it in your presentation and what you're doing. One example is the hill is an important aspect instead of a challenge. So really appreciate you guys embracing the constraints as opportunities. There's friction along the way. You felt it tonight. So have we. But we encourage you to march forward and bring us something better and more filled in next time. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you for taking all the time to give us great feedback. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. To the next part of our agenda. That is chair and member comments, and I know we have a few tonight, so maybe I'll start from that side. So we'll start with Commissioner Felt.
I want to talk. Do we have to talk on mic for chair and member comments? Okay. I want to ask a little bit more about the training that's coming up.
If people could please keep the conversations outside. If people could please keep the conversations out. Yeah. If people could keep the conversations outside, we're trying to conduct the rest of our meeting. Thank you. Almost there. Almost there. Thank you.
Are we supposed to leave?
No, you can hang out. But if you're leaving, we'd encourage you not to be talking really loudly so we can hear ourselves think. Thank you.
I'm glad that the agenda item was moved to June 28th. I'm kind of hoping that the newer commission members get the training before that comes back in front of us. Is that a possibility?
Yes, so maybe we haven't announced it. So we signed up for that online APA training. We just can't figure out how to get it to you individually. We're still working on that, failing. But we have paid for it, so we'll get it to you as soon as we're able. The second piece of that is we have invited John Shardlow, who spoke to the commission, maybe 3 years ago, basic planning commission training, and that will be at your June 14th meeting. We'll do that in a work session at 5 o'clock, so that will be ahead of that ordinance. And hopefully we'll get you the APA training before then, too.
All right, enough of the staff comments. We're not there yet. Back to chair and member comments. I'm kidding. No. Commissioner Miranda, do you have anything? Or?
Yes. So So just to dovetail with the most recent discussion we just had, I do think it's top priority for us to have, I mean, I think there are other areas in the city that we need to explore also, but certainly a small area plan for this neighborhood is, I think, crucial because, I think this project might have been designed somewhat differently if we had a plan, like, for example, we could have internal streets or something within this district. It's very wide. And again, just like I was saying about the Cahill district, it's not as wide, the blocks aren't as wide as that, but they are very wide because it starts narrow and then it gets much wider as you go up. So there's a lot to consider. I mean, each of our small area plans, is specialized for that neighborhood, and there's things here that are different compared to other small area plans that we have. So I think it's really important. And as you mentioned, Chair, that the community has input into small area plans. So that's something, it's a year-long plus process that the community is involved in. And so everyone has a say in what's happening. And I think that's important rather than having, spot rezoning, which I think is a poor idea for an area, even though the comprehensive plan guides it differently than its current zoning. We shouldn't be doing spot zoning. So I think that's really important. And then, I like to consider, I didn't mention anything about VMT on that project, but I did mention that the light rail is less than a mile away, and it's 5 minutes by bicycle. I was on the Climate Action Plan group, and I don't feel like the city is doing anything with the information that we did there, other than EVs, which is an obvious one, and solar panels, which is an obvious one, and would happen regardless of our climate action plan. So I don't like going outside and having orange skies, and I don't like going outside and having 88-degree temperatures, setting a record twice in April. And I don't like, southern Minnesota had 5 inches of rain in a day. And when we hit 88 degrees, Fort Lauderdale had 2 feet of rain. This is getting worse, and I feel like we're just not doing the kinds of things that we need to do as a city. And certainly, you and I went to a presentation by the city's Director of Engineering talking about street redesign right in this neighborhood. And I asked point blank if the climate action plan was used in the guidance for this, and he said no. He said the city has a climate action plan, but it hopes that people will bike and walk. And you can't have a plan, and this is kind of what I brought up the climate action plan at the Cahill district meeting, was that you can't plan for cars, but then hope for bicycles, right? I mean, it doesn't work that way. So we need to plan as heavily for bicycles and pedestrians as we do for cars, and we're absolutely not doing that. So that's it for my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Smith, now you got some juicy stuff to share about ADUs.
Oh. I was going to talk about something else, but I get out.
Well, talk about something else first, then, and then save the best for last.
Yeah. So, I don't know how I say this, but, so I've been working with the city, different folks in my community about how can we help different neighborhoods have neighborhood associations. The goal of which is to help neighborhoods be more resilient, flexible, inviting, community-driven, engage with the city, and social, right? And I say that because as we think about the future and we think about young people, I don't know if you guys have looked at the stats, but teen mental health crisis is a huge deal. A lot of folks are harming themselves, thinking about harming others. And if we can get in front of that by connecting them with folks in the neighborhood, being more social, I think that'll be super valuable. I've read in the Sun Current about some issues in Dinkytown where some Edina kids went over there and was committing crimes. That's not a good sign, right? We need to have ways of reaching these young people so that they don't get into trouble and we could make our communities more resilient. So I'm working with City Liaison, MJ, Lamont, and some other folks. If you guys want to learn more and connect, we're really trying to push the idea of building stronger neighborhood associations. So that was my first point. The second point, and this might be a staff comment to come up later, but we met with City Council last week and we pitched the idea of accessory dwelling units. Part of our work item was to provide a recommendation. So we did some research and we presented our findings, and we do recommend ADUs as another land use option that folks could tap into, that they could use for a whole host of different reasons. Part of it could be economic. You could build something within your home that you could rent out for monetary reasons, or lifestyle. You could have a family member, a kid with disabilities, etc., live in your home but live independently. I think it went really well. The mayor, we softened him up really well, and he thinks that we could move forward with writing the ordinance. Now, that has to be voted on still, so it's not something that's official yet. But we'll bring it back to the Planning Commission and the City Council to vote on so we can move it forward. But I thought it was a really positive sign of something that we could do to help increase land use in the city. So maybe Carrie could add a few more bits onto that when it comes to staff comments, but I thought it was a really good meeting and really good feedback. That's all I had.
Can I add on to that?
Yeah.
I was at that meeting, and Commissioner Smith did an outstanding job of representing the whole ADU issue. There was a lot of discussion about the types of situations in which it would make sense. We talked about elderly family members. We talked about young boomerang children. We talked about people with adults with disabilities and the fact that that wasn't moving forward in other parts. And it occurred to me, though, and I think, as a commission, if in fact, we want to move this ordinance forward, which the mayor blessed in a left-handed kind of a way, I think another aspect of all of that is in terms of all the different ways that you can provide housing to people that didn't come up, that was absent in its representation, was if somebody wanted to support or sponsor a refugee family, like a Ukrainian family or something like that. It's just one more really good reason that we need to make this a priority.
Thank you. Commissioner Day.
I have a question about that, because I wasn't at that meeting. Does that exclude, or is there something in the ordinance here about excluding like Airbnb use and whatnot in terms of renting stuff out for that? Because we don't want to see that to become an issue.
So I think in that meeting, it was really sharing the ideas, getting the insights, getting the green light to move forward. But when it's time for us to write the actual ordinance, we'll go through the detail. I don't think there's any intention of the city right now to make short-term rentals like an Airbnb something that the city would do. I think that's going to be something off the table. But I am excited about this new project and moving it forward, because it would give some residents, if they're so inclined, an economic benefit, long-term rental type of thing, permanent structure. But the short-term Airbnb is something that we didn't really consider as being a part of this.
Okay. Because I could just see this being abused or come back to hurt us in such a way, right, that becomes, if that proliferates, right, then you're boxing more people out than you are actively inviting them in. So that ordinance would have to be written very carefully.
I mean, we don't allow that currently, right?
Right. Correct. You can't.
So.
Yeah. If you're renting, it has to be at least longer than, I believe it's 30 days.
Right. Great.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure. I was like, oh boy, that sounds like we're opening Pandora's box maybe there in that situation. The other thing, just a general comment as far as, it doesn't really even pertain to what Soham presented tonight. But as far as like this preliminary, the sketch plan review and how we conduct those and how we address requests for variances and requests to rezone and whatnot, as far as the meetings that I've attended so far, I feel like I've heard a lot of, right off the bat, I support this, or I like this, before considering I guess, too much, the actual intent of the ordinances or the setback requirements sometimes, or like making sure we fulfill all the requirements of the PUD. And this is not a personal to anybody's level and everything like that, but I just want to make sure that we're careful, and I'm trying to be careful too about not letting my personal bias about a project come into play, right? So an example would be if Sohelm came up before us tonight, presented a gray box and said, here's what we plan on building, and we'd say, well, I'm all for affordable housing, so I'm going to waive all the requirements of PUD because I want affordable housing. Let's not approve bad projects for good intent, right? And so that's, I don't know. It's just more of a general thing that was on my mind tonight as we went through this. And it's like, we didn't have much to go on. We had a tot lot by the highway. We had a very basic sketch plan, and everybody was like, seemed like we're all right, we're ready to approve this today, maybe. And I was like, we held Opus' feet to the fire last meeting, and we said, we need you guys to fulfill all these requirements if you're going to meet this ordinance. And I would hope that we expect that of all of our developers, no matter what their intent is and stuff like that. Yeah.
And this is not approval, this is just support.
No, yeah. I'm just saying it's a very general statement was I'm making, but.
Thank you for that statement. Commissioner Miranda.
Just real quickly, to Commissioner Felt's point, this is non-binding. If I say, I generally approve this project or I approve, affordable housing in general, and they specifically give us a box. We don't want to see the detail of the building, right? Because the whole point of this, of a sketch plan, is that they're trying to figure out, is this even feasible? And so they're really worried about how many units they have more than anything else. And, and then city regulations like setback or whatever. It's not about detail. We really don't want to see detail. We've gone through this multiple times with vendors and or developers, and sometimes they invest a lot of time and money in it, and then it's wasted because we're like, we would never approve this. And it's mostly based on, density or height or setbacks or whatever. So I mean, I feel like it's working really well. I think this is kind of the idea. And they're looking for, again, it's non-binding, but they're looking for us to say, do we generally agree with this or don't we? I mean, that's kind of one of the things we're supposed to do. We're not approving it. It's non-binding, but it's saying, okay, generally this meets the goals of what the city of Edina is trying to do. So I think they need that feedback. So.
I would concur with what Commissioner Miranda said. I think sometimes it's not necessarily, you're right, we don't have the specific what the variance might be, but in general, it reminds me of a project that came last year, the bank that was right off 100 and whatever. And they came and it was pretty clear that none of us were going to support that project, and they pulled the project before they invested too much money into the design. So I think that's sort of, I don't think any of us here thought we were giving carte blanche approval to come back and we'll just approve whatever you want. I think it was just in general, we supported the concept of what they were thinking they were trying to do.
Yeah, and it really just pertains to, as I was thinking about tonight, I was like, I want to avoid the appearance of favoritism, right, in terms of what we support, what we don't, in terms of, we should be making sure, like, if a resident comes to us with, an exception to a setback, we're like, well, I know this guy, I like him, or I like their presentation, right, so therefore I'm going to approve their variance versus somebody else. I just don't, want to have it just start to appear like we have conflicts in terms of how we approach these things, right? Again, just was it's not a, that's why I saved it to the end here. It just was a general thought as we're going through the night in terms of.
It's a good thought in common. And I mean, just thinking back over the years of sketch plan, just in general, every single project and every developer is unique, and they choose kind of their approach. And then we have a history that you can't deny based off of what they've done before, either successfully or unsuccessfully. And some of that factors in because you have to translate, are they going to live up to their word from this conversation? Are they going to come back and show us something better? Because there's been times where it hasn't changed, and then there's certain sites that are much more important than others too. So like, at least for me personally, like Opus to the fire, yes, because it's very, very important. This one, to me, just isn't as important because it's not bound by a small area plan. It's not specifically identified. So some of that definitely comes into play, but it's a good comment to think about. Anyone got anything else? No. All right. Oh, Commissioner Olson,
Sorry.
almost.
I just have a question, because a lot of development is occurring in Southdale, and of course that's my neighborhood, so I'm always walking the dog around there. And I'm curious, because we approve these projects, and then you see a fence go up, and then nothing happens. And so I'm just curious, is there a way to get updated on where some of the developments that we've approved are in the process? And I'm thinking of the corner right across from Galleria on the corner of France and 68th. The U.S. Bank that went in, and they were going to do a tower and then the multi-use. And it's just sort of, I'm just curious because we approved these projects, and I know it takes a while to go from approval to shovel ready, but if there is a more regular way to kind of maybe, hey, they've gotten their building permits or something to kind of keep us up to date with what's going on.
Yep.
Without creating undue burden to
No,
staff.
I can update you on that one right now. I wish I had news, but they did receive their final approvals, so they could be in for building permits, but they are not. The bank is finished, so phase 1, but they've indicated that the residential tower would be the next phase. They were doing some value engineering, and it wasn't penciling. Then they talked about doing the office first, and that's not working out. So neither one is in for any kind of permit. So the site plans are good for 2 years.
Great info.
I've found this period at these meetings to address just those kind of questions to Carrie, or like, what's the update? And that's generally how we get updated on projects that we see, what happened, and just like we did tonight. I mean, this is probably to me was always the best opportunity to get.
Yep. Any others? I can't think of them. So the only 2 updates that I had, we already talked about the training. We'll get that figured out. And then the ADUs, we did get the green light to move ahead with an ordinance. So nothing else for me. We didn't have any items on the council agenda at their last meeting. So that's it.
All right, with that, on to the last item, I welcome a motion to adjourn.
Make motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
So moved. The meeting has been adjourned. Thank you.